video is a continuation from the previous. So what should you photograph? So here's the thing. You either want to think of a story you want to tell and then go somewhere that you can photograph situations that will allow you to create those photographs, or you can let one evolve on its own. Just know that there's an event going on in such and such a place and show up at that event and see what you can capture. Don't always be too set in your original concept so that you don't end up missing out on something great that's just happening around you because you're looking for something that may not happen. So always be open-minded when you show up to an event or a situation where you want to take photos. Look around and see what else might be out there. Just don't limit yourself to your original idea. Use your instincts. If you think there's something there, there is likely something there. Start taking photos until you find direction or purpose. Take a lot of photos. Take advantage of of digital photography and fill your memory card. You can end up trashing everything, or you won't. Most likely you won't. I will tell you, I can go out and shoot. Say I go out and I shoot. I fill a memory card. I shoot 2,800 photos. I'll always get good shots out of that. But I'll always and probably end up, even though I've been shooting for decades, I probably still end up tossing 80% of the photos, 85% of the photos I take. Okay. So this series of photos was someone a photojournalist who just happened to see that something was going on because he was over in Vietnam taking photos. And he just happened to know something was about to happen, and he just started taking photos until he eventually got the famous shot in which they shot the man, and he was there and he captured it. It was it's a horrible photo to look at, but it won him a Pulitzer. All creative work is personal, so we don't always see our own mistakes very easily. Ask other people for feedback. Someone who has no personal feeling towards the images, ask them what they think, and then, take it for what it is. It's that person's opinion. But if it just so happens that you want to reach people by getting critical feedback from others, it can help you understand what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And it's you're getting feedback not to judge you, but you're getting feedback to help make your better decisions about your photos. Go for the different angles, different points of view. Put a face on the story. In this case, feet and hands on the story, but that's really cool, right? The wrinkles of a newborn baby and the wrinkles of an old woman, and what a beautiful photo. Include foreground and background subjects, show context, include contrasts, right? This is what this photo does very, very strongly. The contrast between the old and the young, but they both have something in common that unifies them, and that's their wrinkles. Makes a great photo. Combine good composition, action, and emotions. Engage with your subject and mix those three elements to get a good photograph. When looking for a story in your photos, try different angles. Watch things from a different perspective. Get low or high to change your point of view. There's some people setting dumpsters on fire. If you moved around and took different photos, you'd be able to create a series of photos that probably tell more of the story. Okay, so if you're going to do a photo essay, you should have a simple but clearly defined flow. Like a written essay, it should include a beginning, a middle, and an end. And each shot should be good enough to be viewed separately. They just collectively make something more interesting. And I don't know what the story is in this one, but there's clearly a story. The hook or lead shot. Okay, this is the shot that grabs you and pulls you into the story. Often a creative image that makes the viewer want to see more. The literary equivalent is the first few words of a novel. I'm sure you guys have all heard this, that people will send work to be published, and if the publisher reads the first sentence, and doesn't feel compelled to read further, they don't. That first opening sentence is so important. It's why the courses that you take that focus on literature will talk about the importance of that first paragraph or that first sentence. And so in photography, that first image is the same thing. It's equivalent to that first sentence in your written work of literature. Okay. The establishing shot is a photo that lays visual context of the story. It's usually a wide shot that shows the setting or the environment. In this case, see, we're zoomed out. You see this one person, right? Everybody's seated at this arena and they're holding particular, I'm trying to decide if they're holding something or if the seats are those colors. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, this guy walks across the scene and he becomes the subject. And so we've now got this opening shot. Clearly we're about to zoom in on him and find out what he's up to. That is the establishing shot. The medium shot is a shot where it informs the people viewing your scene who the characters are and what they are doing. It includes the subject and their surroundings. We're not seeing any detail. We're just saying here are a series of men shining shoes for businessmen. The detail shot is where you do zoom in, right? These shots add the flavor to the story. It gives you a sense of intimacy with the viewer. We can see the teardrop on her face. She's been crying. It gives the viewer a sense of place and it helps anchor the story. Now we're zoomed in. Now we're seeing those details. The portrait shot is very close up, right? It's a headshot. It gives a face to your characters. It makes the story personal to someone. We're very close to this person. We can't say we didn't see them. We're in their face. They're in our face. We're forced to notice them. And the great thing about photography is you're not being confronted by a real person. So here you are being confronted by a character who can't look back live, but nonetheless, you're so close to them, you can't just, walk across the street and avoid them. And that's the point. So the gesture or the exchange shot is when you have interaction between subjects in the story. There's some interaction between them. It keeps your video essay from becoming a series of portraits. It's meant to literally be a visual essay in the same way that a literary essay is an essay. The closure shot. The final shot in your story is the parting shot. It draws things to an end and it provides resolution for the story. It does not need to have your photo essay does not need to have every one of these shots. It should have most, but there are no defined rules. The goal is the story, not the process. Okay? So we do have an opening shot. We do have a closing shot. We do have a wide shot, right? We have a detail shot. So we have a bunch of detail shots. He has a lot of detail shots, but he also has wider shots, right? And then he zooms in. And so it helps here tell the story in a sequential manner, but also keeps it diverse and interesting and provides all the different elements that we need to our story. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples and talk about what makes these photographs so great. So what makes this a compelling shot, obviously, is the woman sits among the wreckage of her town after a devastating earthquake and tsunami hit her town in March 2011. And she's in focus, and everything behind her has started to go out of focus, but not so much that you can't see what has happened, that you can't see the devastation. And she's obviously very upset. We can see enough of her face to see how distraught she is. And what makes this a compelling story is that you can see and experience her devastation. So here, the real faces of addiction as a son tries to help his alcoholic father. Very, very compelling story. Watching this young man try to help the father that is fallen down and can't get up. Also, you see how the horizon here is tilted? And that is intentional to make this feel uncomfortable. Loyal dog sits by his human's grave for the second day after disastrous landslide near Rio de Janeiro. Very strong, compelling story of loyalty. Because the only one out there by this mass grave is the dog. Firefighter helps a koala in Victoria, Australia during the Black Saturday bushfires. So there's a group of students who are wanted to play the violin but couldn't afford one. And so here, Diego, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce his name, we'll call him Diego, plays the violin at his teacher's funeral. It was the same teacher who helped him escape poverty and violence through music. Very compelling story. An indicator of whether your photography is good or not is if you do not need to explain anything. A photograph telling a story does not need to be explained. If you want to make the story more complicated, you will need to put in more elements that are in harmony within your frame. It becomes more complicated, and it's a challenging experience, but the elements tell the story. And while I did explain these photos a little bit, I didn't really need to. It was pretty clear in all of them what they were trying to say. Even if you interpreted the story a little differently. And then here are examples of some photo stories, right? This is the processing of almonds for photos that tell that story on how almonds are harvested. And this is just a very abstract, surreal story of a girl eating an ice cream and the boy wanting the ice cream and how he goes about getting it. Yeah, this one's pretty interesting. And the thing I like about this one is you're focused over here and you're not really paying attention. You see he's got a cigarette and you're thinking the story's about that, and then suddenly you begin to notice that there's something in the shadows over here, and it's his prosthetic leg. So this sort of allows the story to slowly unfold. Because it looks like initially it's, maybe meant to be something about addiction, but then ultimately it's about someone who's missing a limb. And, people probably initially are judging him differently in the beginning than they do in the end. And that's part of the point of putting this together. Here's another one. It's a miniature. Okay, so some ideas for things you can use in your story. Actually, I'm going to stop here. We're almost out of time. We'll continue in the next.